Hello, welcome.
Great.
Got Dan Kovalik for company today, and it's a pleasure to have Daniel on the show. We're going to be talking about his recent trip to Syria and what he observed there, the conditions in the new regime in Syria. Just want to give a little bit of background about Daniel's very prestigious background here. He graduated from Columbia Law School. He was a professor at University of Pittsburgh School of Law. Daniel worked as a legal aid in prosecuting violations of human rights in Colombia by people really connected with the Coca-Cola company. He exposed a lot of violations going on in Colombia with towards trade unionists. He's the author of several books. For example, The Plot to Scapegoat Russia, also The Plot to Overthrow Venezuela. All his books are published by Skyhorse Publishing. He's been is a recipient of the Serena Shim Award for Uncompromising Integrity in Journalism. And Daniel is widely traveled, has been all around the world to various conflict zones, Ukraine, the Donbass, Crimea, where he's done some excellent reporting on the reality of the conflict there. Um, and as I say, he's just completed a tour of Syria. So, Daniel, welcome. Thanks very much for giving us your time.
It's my pleasure. Always happy to chat.
Thanks, Daniel. So, Daniel, mindful of the connection, you're in Beirut, and the connection might not hold up too long, so I better get on with this. Daniel, the new government or regime in Syria came to power in December with the downfall of the Bashar al-Assad government. What do you make of the new regime in Syria?
Yeah, well, first of all, it's an interesting phenomenon of what happened. I mean, first of all, what happened was not a revolution, right? These were armed militant groups, armed by the West, the U.S., Turkey, Israel, Qatar, Saudi Arabia. They're made up. They have about 30,000 fighters, and a lot of them are foreign fighters: Uyghurs from China, Ukrainians, Uzbekis. And so it basically, I think they surprised themselves by being able to march basically to Damascus almost unmolested. The Syrian forces did not put up much of a resistance. And there's reasons for that, which I won't go into. But in any case, what you might call it is a coup or something, or they got into power. I'm not sure they know how to exercise it or if they're exercising it much. That's the other thing. I mean, there's not many police. Again, they only have 30,000 people for the whole country. That's not many people.
Mhm.
So it remains to be seen what they're going to do. But people should know that they come out of Al Qaeda. Okay, that is what people should realize. So, um, and a lot of the people in the government have blood on their hands, have committed horrible crimes, particularly against minority groups, Shia, Alawites, Christians, people that they view either to be infidels or worse, apostates, right? They view the Alawites, who are Muslim, to be even worse than, say, Christians who are don't believe in Islam at all. Um, and right now, so there's a lot happening in the country that is not good. Occupying about a third of Syria for years now and taking oil and grain from there.
Sorry, Dan, you got
Meanwhile, right after Assad fell, Israel came in. Hmm?
yeah, no, sorry, yeah, we just lost your
What's that?
word there, Dan. You said who's occupying a third of the country? I think you were saying the United States military and its partners, the Syrian Defense Forces or Syrian Defense Forces.
Syrian Democratic Forces.
Yeah.
Right, the Kurds. They're occupying, the U.S., along with the Kurds, are occupying about a third of Syria, which has the most fertile land for grain, and also it has the most oil reserves. And all those resources are being stolen
Hmm.
from Syria. You might recall Trump during his first term
Hmm.
talked about that occupation and said we were there to get the oil. So he was honest about that, at least. Then, after Assad fell, Israel invaded Syria and has taken over huge swaths of land. They're actually within 3 kilometers of Syria, of Damascus, the capital. They have taken over the tallest mountain in Syria, called Mount Hermon, and they're building a base in southern Syria, a very low city in the north east part. Palmyra, a very ancient city, has been taken over by ISIS. So, first of all, it needs to be pointed out, at the present moment, there's not a lot left of Syria. It's been carved up.
Hmm.
And meanwhile, in a place like Homs, which has a huge Alawite population, also a significant Christian population, there are massacres being carried out by factions of HTS.
Yeah.
HTS, again, which is an outgrowth of Al Qaeda, has about 26 different factions, and they're a monolithic group. And while the leaders in Damascus claim that they have no control over the factions in Homs that are carrying out these massacres, mostly against the Alawite population, which again is the Alawites practice a form of Islam, but it's a much more permissive form. Alawites drink all, do not wear head covering, so
Yeah.
they're seen as, you know. So well, we don't we don't have anything to do with that. Can't
Mm.
control that faction, but they're not doing anything to stop in that area that totally disappeared after HTS came to power, because it
Mhm.
was totally depopulated by
Yeah.
an HTS faction.
Dan,
Meanwhile, I went yeah.
can I just interrupt you there, Dan? Because there's a report just out today. I'm just going to kind of call it up here, Dan. Share the screen.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, it's in the Cradle, and it's reporting that just this week that the US-backed Syrian authorities that you're describing, their HTS, the Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, the dominant faction. This report is saying that they're carrying out well, groups affiliated with them are carrying out assassinations, executions of Alawites that you mentioned. I wonder, can you just see that the introduction of the first paragraph? They've executed reportedly 5 Alawite people in the countryside around Hama, and before that, several other murders of Christians, which corroborates what you're saying. I'm wondering, Dan, did you sense a sort of an atmosphere of fear in the country when you were there? Was there? Did you sense that the minority groups like the Alawite, the Christians, were cowering in fear of retribution from this new regime?
The answer is yes. Now, it varies in area. Damascus, for the most part, feels more secure, again, in part because it's a big city. And the HTS has yet to build a significant police force, has yet to build an intelligence service, so people can move around pretty freely. But I'll tell you, I went to the town of Malula, for example, which is a very famous town. It's an amazing town.
Mm.
I took some amazing photos there. I mean, it's something out of a storybook. It's so beautiful. It's one of the last cities in the world that speaks Aramaic, the language of Jesus, and it is significantly Christian area. And that was the third time I was there. I was there twice in 2021. When I was there in
Yeah, unfortunately, the line is breaking down here with Daniel Kovalik. He's in Beirut. Seems to be a bad signal here. Unfortunately, because Daniel is giving us some good on the ground reporting here of the conditions in Syria after the downfall of the President Bashar al-Assad and his the new regime of Hayat Tahrir al-Sham. Um, oh, I think we've lost Daniel altogether, which is a great shame. I wanted to ask him more about the association with the relation with the United States and the European Union. Um, Daniel, are you there?
Yep, sorry about that. Sorry that
Uh,
I know that broke up. I'm sorry about that.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm sorry
Um,
about this. I'm sorry about this bad connection, which is a real shame because I'm really keen to hear what you're finding there, and I'm sure other people who are tuning in here, the conditions, because the West is kind of really, in my opinion, my perception, the Western media have played down the whole Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, its history of the Al-Qaeda affiliation, this new de facto leader, a man of the name Ahmad Hussein al-Shara, went by the nom de guerre Muhammad al-Julani. Now, the Western media seem to be playing the sinister history down and the very uh,
right.
practice of assassinations and atrocities. We had the European Union's, the German Foreign Minister Annalena Baerbock in the recent weeks coming out to meet this the leader of the HTS, the de facto new Syrian leader. The Americans have sent delegations of diplomats to meet this man al-Shara, formerly Mohammed al-Jolani, and after that meeting, the United States removed him from the terror list. They had $10 million dollars or something on a bounty on his head as a designated terrorist. That's been removed. He's no longer a terrorist as far as the United States is concerned, despite his very well documented history of involvement with Al Qaeda, ISIS, Al Nusra, and latterly the HTS. Sorry, Dan, I just wanted to fill in a bit in case we lost some of the background there with the interruptions. Sorry, Dan, please continue with what you
Yeah.
found there.
Yeah. So if I think I was talking about Malula and how the churches were empty. The first one did have one family of visitors there, but then the big church that everyone goes to that has the tomb of a saint there, which by the way, that tomb had been destroyed in 2013 by the same people that are now in government. They had terrorized Malula in 2013 and tried to destroy the town and the churches, and they kidnapped nuns. They're the same people who are in power now. That has to be pointed out. So in that big
Mhm.
church that has the tomb, it's a beautiful church. There is no visitors at all. Okay. And I talked to two priests there, a priest at one church, a priest at the other church. And they were very clear that the Christians in that town are living in fear. 50 families have already fled the town for Damascus. Other cities, other Christians have left the country entirely. I know of at least one family here in Lebanon that has fled. I'm sure there's more. And there's this huge fear that Christianity will be driven out of Syria,
Hmm.
that the Alawites will be driven out of Syria, that the Shia will be driven out. Already, so this is an interesting thing. The government, HTS government, has bragged that 200,000 people have returned to Syria since they came to power. But the UN says 600,000 people have left.
Hmm.
Well, so that's a net of 400,000, right, that have left.
Right.
And many of those are Shia who've come to Lebanon or gone to Iran. Many are Christian, many are Alawites. And so it's a very dangerous and uh, dark situation.
Hmm.
I actually talked to, and I don't want to give any names out right now, but I talked to a cleric in the Syriac Christian Church, and he was very articulate, and he said a few things that I think people should listen to. He said, "Look," he also made clear these guys are. This is not a revolution. They didn't lead a revolution. They just waltzed into Damascus and declared that they were the leadership. Okay. And he said the U.S. He said it's my opinion. The cleric said that the U.S. brought the HTS there, and he said frankly they can take them, which I thought was very
Hmm.
interesting. And he was not a fan of Assad. He said, "Look, we used to have a dictatorship." He said, "But now we have something worse, and that is a government run by
Hmm.
religious extremists."
Hmm.
And again, his fear is that they're going to impose Sharia law and that there will be no place for Christians or other religions
Because
in Syria, a country that has a long history. Yeah,
yeah, oh, of course, yeah, Dan, you well said. I mean, like the long history of Christianity, St. Paul, the early church, the early Christian church, that is, and what a
St. Peter, yes.
what a catastrophe that and a sign of the times that the Christianity could be driven out of the place where you could say originated. Dan, but thanks for reporting this to us, Dan. But I'm just a little bit uh, taken aback because the Western media are saying very little about the conditions, the appalling conditions that you're describing now, about the fear, the persecutions, the killings, and the Western media. Well, one might be quite cynical and say that there should be no surprise in their narrative they're reporting. But it certainly can be said that the Western media is playing down the situation, trying to lionize the new regime as being kind of reformed militants, and they're taking them on good faith, taking their word for that. They're declaring that they'll not have reprisals and they'll be inclusive and all this stuff. And the Western media seem to be indulging in that kind of description of Syria. It's amazing that you're reporting that the conditions are very dark, very dangerous.
Yes, well, the problem with the Western press, the mainstream press, that especially when it comes to foreign policy, they have lost all objectivity. They are essentially the scribes for their respective foreign ministries or state departments. And of course, HTS, again, as this cleric pointed out, is a product of the United States, of the West, collective West, that is supported them over the years the army, and being the compliant organizations that they are, vilified Assad, continue to vilify Assad, and continue to, as you say, whitewash the crimes of the Western backed
Mhm.
terrorist groups. And that's what they are.
Yeah.
We'll see. You will see what they do in government if they last, but they are terrorist groups. These people have blood on their hands. They chop people's heads off. They committed horrible crimes against the people of Syria. Um, but again, that does not fit the Western narrative.
Mhm. Mhm.
It does not fit the Western narrative, which says that the U.S. is trying to support democracy and freedom in the world and fight terrorism. Of course, things tend to be the opposite.
Mhm.
I'll give you an example, if I may. So right now I'm sitting in Beirut, Lebanon. Just having returned from Syria yesterday. In Lebanon, they have a new president, and he was literally handpicked by the United States. The U.S. ambassador was literally in the parliament handpicking this president. He, at the time he was chosen to be president, was army. It is unconstitutional, according to the Lebanese constitution, for an acting military guy to be made president. He would have had to retire for at least 2 years. And why? Because they don't want a military dictatorship. This is a good thing.
Mhm.
That is a good constitutional provision. But in complete contravention of that constitution, a president was selected, and he was selected because the U.S. wanted him to be president.
Mhm.
Okay, that is democracy, U.S. and Western style.
Mhm.
And again, now in Syria, the U.S., which claims, especially after 9/11, it's been fighting terrorism, has helped install a terrorist group in power, and the Western media is just whitewashing it. And the minority groups who are living in fear are being completely ignored. Again, ironically, even the Christian ones, despite the fact that the U.S., you know, ostensibly or claims to be a Christian country, or certainly, to
Mhm.
follow the Judeo-Christian
Yeah.
tradition, the Christians. The truth is, though, Finian, and this needs to be pointed out, the West finds the Christians in all of the Middle East to be inconvenient because they know if Westerners were aware that there are Christians there, they'd have more sympathy for the Middle East, right? They are not convenient to the desire to wage war against the Middle East.
Mhm.
And so there's been a real concerted effort actually to depopulate the Middle East of Christians, and that has been effective. In Iraq, I believe 80% of the Christians have left there.
Mhm.
From 1990, when the U.S. first invaded, and then after the invasion of 2003. A lot of, I don't know if I would say probably most of the Palestinian Christians have left historic Palestine. Um,
Yeah.
and Syria will lose a lot of Christians now. And again, that's all according to plan.
Mhm.
Um,
Amazing when you
so
think,
it is a tragic situation.
amazing when you think, Dan,
Mhm.
the Trump administration is, you know, got a high representation of sort of so-called Christian, quite ardent, supposedly ardent Christians. I mean, it's amazing, and yet what you're saying is that it's very much pushing a policy that's
Yes, but
destroying Christianity.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, though these are Christians that are Christians in name only. These are people who love Jesus and Christianity and hate real Christians. And they don't, right? They find real human Christians to be, again, an inconvenience, especially if they're poor and especially if they live in the Middle East. They'd rather not
Mm,
acknowledge those people. But there's always been in every religion, there's been these hypocrites. I'm sorry, even Jesus talked about that in about the Pharisees, and who would
yeah.
um he called them a den of vipers because they did all the formalities correct and the rituals, but they did not have the essence of the
Hmm.
religion, which is love for one's fellow humans, right? And so that's what we're left with. But the sad part is, well, the good part is that I think the people in the Levant, whether they're Christians or Shia or Sunni, tend to be more true to their faiths than people in the West, right? But again, a lot of those
Hmm.
religions are going to be lost, and that's a shame.
Yeah, Dan, we're kind of getting we're running out of time here, so I'm just going to quick fire a couple of quick questions to you. Dan, do you think there was any evidence that the United States or the NATO allies were involved in the last offensive, the march into Damascus, well, Aleppo, Hama, and Damascus? Were the United States and its allies involved in that last push, or were they just kind of bystanders? I know they've had a long history of supporting those militants, those terror groups, but do you think they were involved in the
Yes,
last push? Yes.
I think certainly Turkey was, and I'm not sure if the U.S. was directly involved, but of course Turkey is in NATO, and my guess is Turkey would not have acted without some, at
Yeah.
least tacit permission by Washington.
And then there was
The other
reports, Dan,
thing
that
to pay
the
attention to is the fact.
sorry, go ahead.
Mhm. No, just that look how quick Israel got to Syria. And, so they were fighting in Lebanon, fighting in Gaza. Look how quickly they managed to send troops
Yeah.
and their air force to Syria right after, right away after the government fell. So
Yeah. Good point.
certainly there is something going on, and I don't know the level of connivance by the United States or Israel, but certainly they had some role in all this.
I mean, there were reports, Dan, credible reports that the Ukrainian military intelligence were involved in supplying drones to this HTS group that came out of Idlib, the northern province. The Ukrainians were involved, so in supplying drones, and well, one can deduce that that would have involved Western intelligence too, if they were involved. Dan, where can we see your reports on your field trips, your research into Syria? Where are you going to be publishing reports or um, soon?
Yes, yes. So folks can find me at Twitter at Daniel M. Kovalik. I'm going to publish an article for Covert Action magazine, and I'm publishing a new book that'll come out in September on Syria.
Great.
Um, so hopefully that'll give you a lot of material to look
Yeah,
at.
that's excellent, Daniel. Uh, I'm just going to try to call up your publishing page here. Uh, let's see, from Skyhorse.
Thank you.
We've got,
And my
I think,
current book is, yeah, there you go.
yeah. I mean, that was your one of your first books, The Plot to Scapegoat Russia in
That's my
2000,
first book.
2017, and then so this is
That's
Skyhorse
correct.
Publishing, Daniel's page. Then below that, you've got his other titles. That's only a few. There's a few. There are three or four others. The book on Palestine, about cancel culture, the plot to overthrow Venezuela, and No More War, which we referred to in a previous interview, Daniel, when we were talking about the NATO aggression against Yugoslavia. 25 years ago. We mentioned that book. So excellent work by Daniel Kovalik. And I can only recommend everybody to check out Daniel's work, especially this forthcoming report on Syria. I hope we give a little flavor of what's in store for his reporting. But it is truly great, refreshing, Daniel, to hear your findings in Syria, because the Western media are certainly lulling people into a sense that everything is, hunky dory in Syria, and the new rulers, the new reformed militants will somehow deliver decent governance. But you've got a very grim warning as to what's going on in that country.
Absolutely. I think, look, I always try to remain hopeful, but I think the truth needs to be told about what's happening, and they need to be held to account
Mm,
for what is happening, even if it's one of their factions they claim they don't control. Well, that's not going to wash. It's
hmm.
now been a month since they've been in power,
Yeah,
and again, the massacres of Alawites, especially, and the persecution of Christians needs to end.
yeah. Daniel Kovalik, thank you so much for giving us your time. And sorry about the poor connection at times there, Daniel, but I think luckily enough, fortunately, we could hear a lot of your substantial detail. And thanks so much, Daniel.
Thank you, Finney. Always a pleasure, my friend.
Take care, Daniel.
You too.
Bye
Peace.
bye. Bye bye.